Hello everyone, welcome to my Field of Glory 2 post-game analysis. This game is taken from round 5 of the holiday tournament, the 2017-2018 holiday tournament. Features Romans versus Ancient British. Just a quick note, I apologize for the audio issues. I was in the middle of a move and so I recorded it in two different places, and that's why you might notice the sound discrepancies.
And just as with the previous video, the format of the content will be a reasonably quick overview of the actual game, showing you my moves and the important moves of my opponents. And we will follow that up with detailed analysis on troop selection with respect to the terrain, with respect to the force composition of the opponent I was playing. We'll also go over important sort of turning points in terms of major strategy decisions made by both sides. And onto the two armies. The Roman army we'll be playing today is the 105 BC to 25 BC Roman list. This is the first Roman army list to be considered part of the post-Marian Reform era. And if you don't know anything about Roman history, that's when the quote unquote the proletariat or the landless segment of the Roman populace was finally allowed to join the army due to critical manpower shortages over the years as Rome fought war after war with Carthage, and after Carthage was done, they started running roughshod over much of Egypt, Greece, Turkey, and the Near East. But I'm sure you can find that story elsewhere. The British list is the 60 BC to 80 AD list. In terms of composition, it isn't a heavy foot list like the Romans with their legionaries. They are instead fielding primarily what they call warriors, classified as warriors or loose order warbands. If you're wondering what those are essentially just a fancy name for undrilled medium foot. They behave like medium foot in almost every respect, except that they are like warbands. So they will pursue broken enemies, and they are also considered unmaneuverable because essentially they are undrilled. Warbands like loose order warbands, like any other warband, is considered an impact foot unit. And the ancient Brits are also backed by a very large contingent of British chariots. These are light chariots. They're superior quality with light spear, but no other capabilities. They don't have any armor at all. So while dangerous on the charge, they are very bad at prolonged combat. But a lot of people underestimate them. But if you can find a way to flank or get behind the enemy army, they can be quite useful attacking from the rear. I actually spent a lot of time in force selection and deployment. Basically, I was kind of miffed because this was basically like 4 out of 5 rounds where I have to attack up a hill, where there was definitely no way I could get up the hill before my opponent did. So I was kind of annoyed, but you kind of have to deal with what you get. I end up deploying most of my skirmishers on the right side, and I pick up 3 medium foot units to go along with them. On the odd chance, maybe my opponent will be asleep at the wheel and not take the high ground, and I can put my skirmishers all over it before he could get up the hill. But it was a long shot. It didn't work, as you'll see in a moment. But it was worth a try. In terms of other deployment, I've got the main legionary line set up. We're going to try to move around the big hill. I picked up 2 out of the 4 possible cavalry units. I've also got the got the elephant option going on as well, because that's probably useful for the chariots. And with our force deployed, we get the first move since we're side B, and we see the part of the British Army deployed. I'm going to send a couple of guys up the hill. The skirmishers will go up the hill, like I said. Maybe my opponent's asleep at the wheel. If there's free lunch, I always take it. You can immediately see that there's like a lot of chariots. My opponent took a lot of chariots, and I also want to find out what's behind the hill to see exactly what's going on. So I push both light horse up, and I catch a glimpse of the warband line that's behind the hill. And for me, I was kind of like, I kind of figured that his plan would be to charge up the hill, seeing the way he deployed. But there's not much I can do about it. One thing I did not want to happen definitely was I could not have those chariots running amok behind me. So if there was any possible way at all, I would try to seal the gap on the left to make sure that he couldn't get behind me. Having that many chariots run loose behind your line is one of the few ways you can end up losing this matchup as the Romans. So I took great care to make sure that didn't happen. Unfortunately for me, my opponent is not asleep at the wheel. He's actually picked a lot of skirmishers, and they all show up from behind the hill now. And it's quite obvious there's no way I can really take the hill or really contest it. A, I don't have the skirmisher power to push his skirmishers off, and B, even if I did, I don't have the medium troops to hold the rough ground at the top of the hill, and I was never going to get there first. So it was time to beat a hasty retreat with the skirmishers. By the way, don't be like me. Scout first, shoot later. Otherwise, you're going to end up, losing a move on a unit, and you could potentially end up losing the unit, like I did with the archers there. On my left, not a lot to see here. Just continuing to close up the gap on the left side so that he can't sneak his chariots across. Although, judging by the fact he only sent 4 chariots forward, I don't think he was planning on seriously sending his mounted troops en masse around me. Before I end the turn, I bring back my light horse. Their scouting job having been done, I don't want them sitting in front of the chariots, because there's a good chance the chariots could actually catch the light horse if they attempted to charge. And we shift all our troops over now, given that there's no more point posturing to take the hill. We've already lost the fight for that. So the situation at the moment is kind of disheartening. The hill at the center of the map is clearly the dominating feature, and it's covered in rough terrain, surrounded by difficult slope. So my legionaries, it's like toxic waste to my legionaries. I can't do anything about it. I can't send my legionaries in an assault up the hill. He also has more skirmishers than I do. So it's not like I can use mass missile fire to try to compel him to come out. So the first plan, plan I came up with was to use some of my skirmishers as bait, try to lure some of his skirmishers out, and use a light horse that I've since pulled back to overrun the overextended skirmishers. And that way, maybe I could circle back, actually win the skirmisher war, and try to compel him to come off the hill that way. But my opponent is pretty wise to my ways, and it's fairly obvious that he's not going to fall for that, as he quickly scampers back up the hill once he sees the light horse close in. And on the other side of the line, there's not much to look at. It's just the two of us playing footsies, with him still trying to see if he can slip 1 or 2 chariots behind me, but I'm pretty adamant not to let that happen. But the larger question remains in terms of what can I do to win this game? Even if I don't allow his chariots to come around my flank and get into my rear, that still doesn't win me the game. I might be able to drive one or two of them off the map edge, and gain a few percentage points that way, but it's not nearly enough to secure a victory. And by now it's quite obvious he's not coming off the hill, and he has no good reason to come off the hill when you think about it, because trying to come off that hill with medium foot warbands to take on a Roman army that's formed up and waiting for you out in the open is just as suicidal as if I was to try to go up that hill myself, to dig out loose order warbands in rough terrain and guarding a difficult slope. It is next to impossible. So what I have to do is I have to actively weaken my position. I have to give him a reason to come out to fight me. And so I spend the next couple of turns actually chasing off a couple of chariot units off the map edge, but also thinning out my line and leaving major gaps. As you can see, the slack Roman legionaries haven't moved from that position. They're not actively trying to threaten any warbands that come down. And I'm also continually pushing the line north to stretch it even thinner, so that his chariots might have a chance to get flanking attacks in, to help support his warbands should they decide to come off that hill. As you can see, I've actually moved a 3004I unit out into no man's land, essentially to present a gambit to my opponent, to borrow a chess term. And with the 3004I unit left hanging, he does actually begin the attack, and he charges several chariot units in. The 3004 unit is quite the hero though, and makes an impressive stand against my opponent.
I also at this point decide to sacrifice a light horse as well, clear off some skirmisher units, and sit a light horse right in front. I also end up closing troops up on the position of the isolated warband that's now off the hill, basically saying to my opponent that if you want to save that warband unit, you're going to have to come off the hill and make it a fight. The big thing is though to actually leave him a gap of open space in the middle. If I was to march my guys right up to the hill, to the bottom of the hill, then that gives him no chance to actually move off, because his troops would still be disrupted on the severe slope, while my guys would be at 100% effectiveness. So we leave him enough for him to come off to make a fight of it. In retrospect, after looking at this game again, I wonder if I maybe pulled the trigger a bit too soon in terms of closing up on the hill. I definitely, if I was the British player, I might have been tempted to see if I was willing to offer a bit more in terms of free material before willingly coming off the hill. In this case, my opponent either through generosity or maybe he really thought he could take on the units, given that we were a bit scattered. The Roman line was a bit scattered. Maybe he thought he could take them on. He also manages to corner a free light horse there as well. The battle really begins in earnest now, and the Roman lines obviously close up on the British, and it's not going to be a remotely fair fight. The Romans typically dice up warbands for breakfast fairly easily. We even have an elephant available to screw up or mess with enemy chariots. And really the warband units, despite the fact that they're vastly inferior to Roman legions, simply don't have enough independent elements for them to really go wide on the Romans. So what they're stuck with is trying to fight a series of one-on-one battles and hoping to get lucky over and over again, which as you can see is not going to happen. Another reason why this matchup is so one-sided, especially once it gets out into open terrain, is that these warbands, being loose order warbands, are warriors and not heavy foot. Well, even close order heavy warbands no longer get the heavy foot +1 cohesion check bonus, so they're very vulnerable to things like chain panics, and given their propensity to push back, they also leave themselves quite often vulnerable to things like this, where they push back an enemy, and that just they're only rewarded by getting flanked in the rear or on the side and quickly collapsing. Romans, at least if this happens to them, given their +1 foot to being their heavy foot and their +1 to their morale checks, things like chain panics happen a lot less. And I mean, this little sequence just I mean, speaks for itself. Unit breaks, causes other units to get disrupted. They break, causing more to rout, and very quickly the score. This is happening all in one turn, by the way. Very quickly the score has run up to a reasonably insurmountable, an insurmountable edge, pretty much. There's not a whole lot left to say about this, the rest of this battle. Most of the rest of the 2 turns was just the rest of the Romans butchering the remaining British warbands that were still stuck in the open. And yeah, that should send it to 43%, and I'm pretty sure my opponent cannot get a rally the next turn. And with the game complete, we're going to go over army selection as before. As always, the picks you make should be predicated on terrain and the army that you are facing off against. In this case, we are facing off against the ancient British. The ancient British is really a simple army. There's not much to them. Their core components are Celtic chariots, which are light chariots, superior quality with light spear, but no real extended melee combat capabilities. They don't have swordsmen or anything like that. Their other mainstay is lots and lots of loose order warbands. They're considered warriors, which is really just a fancy name for untrailed medium foot. They have the same penalties as medium foot does against things like heavy foot. I think against things like cavalry, losing to cavalry. They're also unaffected by rough ground, although they will be disordered by things like severe slopes, marshes, and the like. But they are just like close order warbands in the regards that they're considered unmaneuverable. So you won't see them doing any sort of freewheeling tactics. They're very much line them up and come straight at you and hope the impact foot capabilities can punch through their opponents. Because of this, and because of the fact that there is a hill on his side of the map that I'm unlikely going to be able to take, you'll see in this game, even though the 105 BC Roman list has a superior selection of medium foot compared to the 199 BC Roman list from the first video, I choose to only take 2 Thurio-Phori and a Spanish Scudieri. I never really had it in my mind to try to go up that hill and hold it. The odds were always against us, so I chose to go all in on the open ground troops. To that end, we do take 2 additional Roman legionaries in addition to the 4 compulsory. Roman legionaries are unique to the 105 BC list. You didn't see them before. The 199 and early Roman lists did not have this unit, but they're pretty much carbon copies of the veteran Hastati Principes, in that they are superior quality. They are impact foot with swordsman backup. They are armored, and they are very dangerous, very, very dangerous. They're maneuverable. They're sturdy, and they pass morale checks very well. The new upper tier heavy infantry unit in this list is the veteran Roman legionaries. This is, as of 1.25, I believe, the only true elite unit in the game. in that they are the only unit to gain a full 100 points of advantage off their unit quality alone. We choose to take only one of them because there's really nothing for them of value to hunt. They're very expensive. They're 76 points, or sorry, 96 points, and the rest of the army, the Roman army, is expensive as it is. So I don't want to go too small in terms of total element size. Really, the 96 point veteran Roman legionaries, they're there to hunt or to outdo your opponent's elite units. So, for example, if I was looking at an enemy army that would have lots of significant targets or lots of problematic units, such as superior warbands, such as veteran pikes, veteran Roman legionaries would be the ones you bring to do the job, so to speak. But given that this is a fairly average quality army, I think they only have one superior mainline infantry unit. It's like some sort of picked warbands or something like that. There's not much really for them to hunt. I ended up taking one simply because if sort of like as a hammer unit, if a dirty job needed to get done in the open, if I really need to break down a section of their line really quickly and pronto, that's the guy I'm going to send in to do the job. The elephant option I almost always take. I mean, as the Romans, as with the 199 BC list, it helps you cover for so many weaknesses. Even though the 105 BC Roman list does have a significantly stronger cavalry arm, you have access to noble cavalry and armored noble cavalry, which are a lot better than the regular armored cavalry found in the 199 BC list. The elephant is still nice, really nice to have, especially if the opposition has things like cataphracts. The other upside is that elephants are really good against impact foot. If you didn't know, impact foot swordsman units, they have like 0 POA in melee against elephants. So elephants are a great pick against both Romans and warband armies alike. It's going to be one of your best picks available. We pick up 2 noble cavalrymen. I like noble cavalry. They're relatively cheap at 44 points. Armored noble cavalry is not really that much better. They do get the armored status, but they're also significantly more expensive at 12 points apiece. Something that I personally feel is not worth the upgrade. I mean, if you really want four cavalry units, by all means, if there are situations that warrant it, go ahead and pick them up. But for our purposes here, given that the central hill is going to sort of curtail cavalry actions to sort of the really extreme edges of the map, I felt 2 was enough to seal off the flanks or keep the enemy chariots occupied while hopefully my infantry would do the work. Slack Roman legionaries are no longer in the game. Well, I mean, they are. They're just known by a different name called mediocre Roman legionaries. They are basically average. They're the same as the regular Roman legionaries, but instead of being superior, they're average quality. I do pick up 2 of those because I need some more cost-effective options. As I mentioned before, Roman legionaries are expensive units, and you don't want to get caught in a situation where you have a really small number of men and get surrounded. Romans are good, but being surrounded is something that not even Romans can typically dig themselves out. Make sure, especially if you're playing this list, that you do round yourself out with some cheaper heavy foot. As I mentioned before, 2 304i, 1 Spanish Scudieri. That's just additional cheap units to help extend the line. They'll do okay against loose order warbands. It's not something they're not going to win an extended fight, but if I do meet the warbands out in the open, I'm fairly certain that the warbands that are phasing off against my Roman legionaries are going to lose a lot faster than my 304 and Spanish Scudieri are going to lose to to his warbands. So as a holding force, even out in the open, they work perfectly fine. In terms of the skirmisher arms, the two light javelin horse are superb units. Light javelin horse are just great. They scout really well. You can almost never catch them. If you have a slower enemy unit, like, you're just never catching them, and so they can scout really well. They can march up, or ride up, I should say, right up to enemy heavies or enemy foot, and pound them with javelins. They're also very good late game. You don't get an example of it here, but they're very good at making sure high quality enemy units that you do end up defeating don't end up rallying and coming to bite you in the butt. Enemies that are actively being pursued cannot rally, so they're a very cheap way, especially once they've expended all their javelin, to hang around the enemy lines, behind the enemy lines. Once you rout something important, they can keep the pressure up, so they never get a chance to rally. This is especially true if that elite unit has a general in it, because a unit with a general in it will get the chance to rally every turn, unless you deny it by the chance to rally by constantly pursuing. In terms of the foot skirmishing arm, we don't get the Velites anymore. That's sad pandas, but it is what it is. We do get Cretan archers in return, and we still have regular light javelin and an assortment of slingers, and we pick up the full option of those, just on the off chance of he neglected his own skirmishing arm and chose to sit on the hill. We would be able to sit there and pelt him repeatedly, maybe frustrate our opponent into coming out and fighting on uneven terms. The next thing I wanted to talk about is not actually a position, but I guess the conversation I had with my opponent over the course of the game. Part of it is, as you can see, it's a bit of friendly banter, just a bit of coordination, because it's a tournament game, and so we need to flip the turns fairly quickly in order to meet the time controls. But you can see right in the middle, Gary Norman, the gentleman who I was playing against, he commented on the fact that he climbed the hill. He wouldn't have climbed the hill if the games had been simultaneous. So just a bit of background as to what happened. This was round five of the tournament, and because of technical issues, these are mirrored matches, by the way. So I would be playing a game simultaneously, or what should have been simultaneously, as the British, with him being the Romans. Because of technical difficulties, we actually had this game could not be started until well after we finished the first mirror, which was me playing the British. And in that game, I had managed to get a win using the British against the Romans, and I was in contention for a podium spot, whereas the loss meant that he was no longer in contention. So he was basically stating that if he had something, like a podium spot to play for, maybe he wouldn't have taken the passive line he took, which was sitting on top of the hill. And I made it quite clear to him that I didn't really have a problem with it. That he there was no obligation, and I said that to him directly, that he had no obligation to hand me points, free points, so to speak. And that's sort of a mindset I really wanted to go over, given that in the past I've seen complaints about opponents being passive or sitting on top of defensive positions and refusing to come off. And this is really something that I wanted to touch on. Now, the Romans versus the ancient British is not a fair matchup. It's personally, in my opinion, if it's against two competent opponents and it's open terrain, the Roman player literally rolls over the ancient British without breaking a sweat, like 9 times out of 10. As long as the chariots are kept under control, really the Romans have absolutely nothing to be worried about. The Romans have all the weapons that are needed to dismantle the ancient British, and the ancient British list has really no answers available. They don't have the numbers, they don't have the maneuverability, they don't have the quality. Uh, their core unit is a 720 man unit, so they're expensive because they just come in in deep ranks. But the deep ranks, all the deep ranks in the world, isn't going to save them from superior quality armored Romans coming after them. So it's an uneven fight. And really, when you take a look at a lot of these matchups, even in tournaments, there are going to be a lot of these asymmetrical matchups where there is going to be an army that is significantly weaker. Even in the league games, the Field of Glory 2 digital leagues, not all armies are created equal, and you sometimes don't get the army you want, and it's the other guy that has like the Terminator style army, be it the all horse archer army, or the Indians with their incredibly strong ranged combat power, or somebody's going to get the Romans, and you might be stuck. You might be stuck playing a lesser army. And in cases like that, it's, in my opinion, always okay to hole up if you see no other solution. And in this case, there was very little solution to it. I mean, the hill was both a curse and a blessing for him, because of the fact that the hill in the middle cut off the map essentially in half. There wasn't a lot of play space for his chariots, as you saw in the replay. I very easily managed to close off that side of the map. In fact, in his attempt to slip just 2 chariots through, a single legionary charging managed to drive them both off the map, and they never came back. And that's a big loss. That's like 70 points just gone down the toilet. And so really the only choice was for him to go up the hill and maybe hope that I was stupid enough to send heavy foot into steep slopes after him. And of course I didn't do that either. What I did do though was basically offer him some sort of compensation, if you want to use that word, to come off the hill. And I just used this screenshot just to illustrate the position here, that you can see how strung out my line is, and how far, especially the veteran Roman legionary I had, how far away that is from his cluster of heavy foot, so that if he decided to come down, it wasn't immediately the jaws of death waiting for him. I mean, I could have very easily kept my lines compact and just sat right at the bottom of that hill, so that the moment anyone made a move down, they'd instantly get eaten alive by the Romans. But the point I'm trying to make here is there's always got to be some sort of give and take, especially if you need a win. If you were in my spot, I mean, like I said, I could have easily turtled up myself, but right underneath the hill, so that he had no place to go. But what would that accomplish? You're basically asking your opponent to come and basically hand you the game for free. And why would your opponent do that? There's really no reason for that to happen. So next time, I guess, you're caught in a situation where your opponent is playing a bit passive, sitting on top of a hill, sitting on top of some really good defensive position, that is next to impossible to move them off with by force. Maybe consider offering a little something, offering him a bit of incentive, give him a chance to come off that hill, give him a reason to come off that hill. Personally, I was prepared to offer a lot more. When I was shifting the slack Roman legionaries behind, I was prepared to basically let him have the Ethereal Four Eyes and the Scudiari essentially for free as well. Luckily for me, it never came to that. He basically moved down off the hill to target the Ethereal Four Eye immediately after I started shifting the slack Roman legionaries. Whether my opponent decided to come off because he simply felt bad and thought it was unsportsmanlike to sit on top of the hill, knowing full well that by doing so he could forcibly deny me the chance to get to the podium spot, I don't know. Or maybe he thought he could leverage that. He expected to beat up that one spearman unit, the 304i unit, quickly enough and leverage the hole in my line into a reasonable chance at a win. Maybe you thought that, I don't know, but like I said, I was personally prepared to offer and was in the middle of moving my army to offer a lot more. To try to entice him off the hill, to give him a reasonable chance to come off the hill. But I mean, you can think about it this way. Say you scratch out both 304 and a Scudiari off my, and just deleted them out of the game. I'd still say, even if the Romans came off the British came off that hill, they'd still be pretty big underdogs. Even losing 120 points of units for free, coming out in the open like that would definitely take a brave man. In any case, if it was because he felt like it was a sportsmanlike obligation to come off the hill, I thank my opponent. In the end, I didn't get there anyways. Even with scoring errors and all that kind of stuff, I think I finished fourth. It was in the tournament, but it was a nice gesture of him, regardless. If he legitimately thought that 304i unit was enough compensation, I'd suggest to him maybe next time be a bit greedier. Wait for me to offer a bit more before coming off. But just as I said before, next time you're in this situation, think about what you can do yourself in terms of trying to offer your opponent some agreeable terms to come off that hill. Because at the end of the day, it's no fun. It's no fun for him to, if he had just marched out and gotten butchered, that's not a lot of fun for him as well. So there always has to be some give and take, especially when there's some sort of asymmetry going on. Thanks everyone for watching. Sorry about the delay in terms of getting this video out. I was in the middle of a move, so that obviously prevented me from doing a lot of work in the interim. Coming up for you, I have a video reviewing a Field of Glory 2 digital league game with me playing the familiar 199 Roman BC list against another successor state army, and this time I lost, and we'll be going back and exploring some of the reasons why I lost, and just to compare and contrast, because I got a lot of comments about, oh wow, I picked a pike army list, and they were really worried about how they would do against other armies, including the Romans. And fortunately, we had a really competent player in the opening round of the Field of Glory 2 tournament and handed me a loss right out of the gate. And so we'll be taking a look at that game and seeing what we can learn from it. Thanks for watching.